Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Delaney, I've been listening to your answers about your conduct in the St. Paul's case, and I have to tell you, I'm having a hard time following what it is you're saying. You've said now several times that the school only wanted the court case to be tried in a court of law, not in the media. But your attempt to strip anonymity from Chessie was exactly an attempt to try this case in the media, right? It was an attempt to bring her name forward so everybody would know who she was. She's 16. Everybody would know exactly who she was, could look her up, could threaten her, intimidate her. I mean, this was an attempt to put her squarely into the media spotlight nationally, right?
Senator, thank you for the question. I respectfully disagree that the school's intent in trying to require the lawyers to try the case in the court of law was in any way intended to intimidate any of the parties to the case.
How can you say that when you knew full well that a 16-year-old girl would have her name published, would have reporters, no doubt, in her front lawn, would have people following her around with cameras everywhere? Her family's sitting here today. They've already been through hell. Your motion was an attempt to put them through further hell in order to defend your client, right?
Senator, I was an advocate for the school.
I understand that, but as advocates, I have been too. And as advocates, we make decisions, but we're responsible for those decisions. You made a decision here. You made a decision to try to strip a young girl of her anonymity, and you effectively succeeded because you bullied her into it. So she, unwilling to be intimidated by you, went forward and revealed her own name, which took, by the way, tremendous courage. And I'd just like to honor her for her courage in doing that. But you put her to that choice. You did. That was your choice. So that's fine. You made the choice, but now you're accountable for it. So let's have some accountability here. You deliberately did this in a way that would put her at risk, and that was your intent. Have you read the letter that she submitted to this committee?
I have read the letter that was submitted to this committee.
Let me read some of it to you. She says, and I quote, "I remember so clearly reading Michael Delaney's motion from front to back when I came home from my new high school one day, processing what it meant, and then defiantly stating to my parents that after everything I'd been dragged through, from anonymous death and rape threats on the internet to the betrayal of and backlash from my closest friends at school, I wasn't going to let Michael Delaney's dirty tactics bully me, then 16 years old, into shame and silence." She goes on, and this is important. "When survivors of sexual assault, harassment, and abuse come forward to seek some semblance of justice, there is an army of attorneys with a tried and true playbook of tactics to discredit, pressure, and manipulate survivors and victims into silence." Those were the tactics that you used, Mr. Delaney.
Senator, I respectfully disagree with that characterization of the role I played as an advocate in the case. The school agreed to allow the case to proceed with anonymity. I have...
No, you didn't. You filed a motion that specifically sought to strip her anonymity. I have it right here. I've read it, and I've read your reasons for doing so. The school didn't like the time that the parents and Chessie filed their lawsuit. You complain that counsel filed the complaints minute before the clerk of the court's office closed on June 1st, 2016. Well, I'm sorry for you, but I don't understand why your inconvenience about the time should mean that this young woman should have to surrender her anonymity and have her life. She's a survivor of sexual assault, let's not forget. That already happened. You knew that. Why should she have to have her life further destroyed because you didn't like the timing of the filing?
Senator, I represented the school in that case. I did not represent the Prout family. I understood what they went through. The school felt that the request to restrict the lawyers from trying the case in the media was compatible with her desire to proceed with privacy and anonymity.
I don't understand what you're saying. You filed a motion that sought to strip her anonymity. You told the court that it should happen because you didn't like the time at which her counsel filed their complaint because it put your school at an inconvenience. They had to answer reporter questions, you said. Frankly, that seems to me like a small burden to bear after what Chessie went through. So you made the decision. You forced her to come forward. She was brave and did it, and now you're accountable for that. And quite frankly, I'm astounded you've been nominated. I can't believe we're sitting here having this conversation today. And I, for one, will not support your nomination for these reasons. People who put sexual assault victims through this kind of torture shouldn't sit on the bench. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Cornyn.
Mr. Shogan, when you were here last year, a number of senators asked you, including me, a series of questions about articles you'd written, public statements you had made on social media that were, I have to say, pretty grossly partisan, and I thought offensive, and you and I went back and forth about it. After that, a number of us asked you questions for the record relating to these statements. I want to follow up on one of them. I, in particular, asked you to give us a full accounting of the public posts that you had made on Twitter. You had locked your Twitter account before you came before this committee. It had previously been public. I asked you to provide the public posts that had previously been available on Twitter because the ones that we have were pretty disturbing. You responded as follows, and I quote, "My personal Twitter account is comprised of posts about my mystery novels, events at the White House Historical Association, Pittsburgh sports teams, travels, and my dog," end quote. Is this an accurate statement?
Yes, Senator.
I just remind you you're under oath. Is this an accurate statement?
Yes, Senator.
Well, let's talk a little bit about your Twitter posts then that I was asking you about. On February 18th, 2022, you posted on Twitter bemoaning the dropping of mask requirements for children, including those under the age of 5. Do you remember that post?
No, Senator. Those tweets were in my personal capacity.
No. I asked you, would you give all public posts that you had made on Twitter? You said no, effectively, and you said that your Twitter posts consisted of mystery novels, events at the White House Historical Association, Pittsburgh sports teams, travels, and my dog. And you just told me now under oath that you stood by that. So now let's talk about your Twitter posts. On February 18th, 2022, you posted bemoaning the fact that mask requirements for children under the age of 5, one of whom I happen to have, by the way, had been dropped. Is that a post about your dog or sports teams?
My social media is in my personal capacity,
Answer
Senator.
my question, please, because you've testified under oath that you only posted about your dog and sports teams and novels, and you also said you wouldn't give this committee any of your public posts. So, is your post on February 18th, 2022, bemoaning the lifting of mask requirements for children under the age of 5, who I might just ask, all of the data has said is extremely harmful to children, these mask requirements? We'll leave that aside for now. Is that a post about your dog or sports teams? Yes or no?
My social media is in my personal capacity, Senator.
Yes or no, Ms. Shogan? You are under oath before this committee, and I have to say, you have placed this issue squarely in record by repeatedly refusing to answer. Yes or no?
My social media is in my personal capacity, Senator.
So you're not answering my question. Let's talk about another post. 26th of May, 2022. You talk about an assault weapons ban, retweet a post, ban assault weapons now. Say you agree with this idea that you have to be a certain age to buy so-called assault weapons in America. Is that a post about sports teams or your dog or mystery novels?
My social media is in my personal capacity, Senator.
What about the post on January 5th of 2021 in which you say that Ted Cruz ought to stay in his own lane and not worry about what's going on in Pittsburgh? This is a reference, I think, to questions he had about the certification of the last election. Is that a post about your dog or sports teams or mystery novels?
My social media is in my personal capacity, Senator.
What about the post, you remember December 10th, 2020, where you said that you were hoping that President Trump would have his vetoes overridden, and you agreed with the post that he was a weak policy president? Is that a post about your dog or sports teams or mystery novels?
My social media is in my personal capacity.
What about your post on January 5th, 2021, in which you speculated that President Trump would pardon himself next participating in conversation about the certification of the Electoral College. Is that a post about sports teams or mystery novels or your work at the White House Historical Association?
My social media is in my personal capacity, Senator.
What about the post? Do you remember this one? I said we seem to be having an incredible case of amnesia, but maybe you remember this one. This is from December 3rd of 2021, in which you advise an individual who goes by Meg on social media that the Library of Congress, you advise this person to complain about religious flags that have been planted on the grounds of the Library of Congress, and you say that they ought to be removed. And you go on to give this person advice about how to complain and have them removed. Do you remember that post?
My social media is in my personal capacity.
Do you remember the post?
My social media is in my personal capacity, Senator.
I have to say, I have been here for 4 years in the Senate. I have never seen a witness stonewall like this before. Never. And I've seen a lot. This is extraordinary. Do you remember this post? December 3rd, 2021.
My social media is in my personal capacity, Senator.
I mean, this is unbelievable. And you want to be the archivist of the United States. You lied to us under oath. You lied to us in your QFRs. You just lied to me a second ago under oath. And now you're sitting here stonewalling, not answering questions about public posts that you've made. Are you a lawyer, Ms. Shogan?
No, Senator.
Are you familiar with the Shurtleff case at the United States Supreme Court?
No, Senator, I'm not.
Well, in that case, the Supreme Court held that, in fact, it constitutes viewpoint discrimination for a government entity to remove religious flags from its property when it's opened up the property to allow other people to put flags on it. Exactly the question that you were addressing in your public posts on Twitter. You're giving legal advice, which you're not qualified to give, directly contrary to the United States Supreme Court. I just wonder, does this have to do with your view that you wrote about that the religious right is connected to the rise of anti-intellectualism in American politics? Is that why you said what you said about religious flags, that the religious right is a force for anti-intellectualism? Explain that to me.
No, Senator.
Do you stand by your comment that the religious right is part of the rise of anti-intellectualism in American politics?
Senator, that article was written. It was about how Republican presidents use common sense terminology to effectively communicate with Americans.
Yeah, in which you said that the religious right, the rise of the religious right is part of the rise of anti-intellectualism in American politics. I just point out that's the article in which you say anti-intellectual, the title is Anti-Intellectualism in the Modern Presidency, Republican Populism. Very nonpartisan. Dr. Shogan, I'm going to ask you again, will you give to this committee your public posts on Twitter? Will you make them available to this committee?
My social media is in my personal capacity.
Mr. Chairman, I have to tell you, this is the most extraordinary thing I have seen in my brief time in the Senate. I have never seen a witness blatantly lie under oath like Dr. Shogan has just done to this committee, stonewalled this committee, and just repeatedly refused to answer my questions about her own posts that are in public. For these reasons, I will oppose your nomination, and I strongly, strongly urge this committee to take action on this and force this witness to own up to the fact that she is misleading us right now before our eyes, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Hawley, at your convenience, the floor is yours for as long as you would like to take it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the ranking member, Senator Ernst. Thanks to the witness, too. I apologize. I've come from another hearing where I was the ranking member. Let me, Mr. Saeed, say thanks for being here again today. It's been a while since we talked last, and a lot has happened since then. I imagine you've been asked about a number of these questions, but I just want to make sure that we've covered the waterfront on this. Let's talk about Engage Action and the statements they made regarding the state of Israel, so we can get this satisfied, these questions fully answered. Again, I'll take a look at what you've said to other citizens. As you know, Engage Action made a number of statements about the state of Israel. You served on their board. What would you say about the statements that this organization on whose board you served made, and how would you separate yourself from them?
Senator, good to see you. You know, my allyship with the Jewish community, my work with Israel as a partner, both at the State Department and as a businessman all my life, I think speaks for my my statement, my take on this issue. I have worked with Israel-based companies. I've mentored Israeli entrepreneurs my entire life. In my current role as a public servant, I'm advancing U.S. commercial interests around the world, including partnering with Israeli entrepreneurs. And so I think that is what I stand for. I'm not going to be able to speak for Engage's position on these. I have clearly shared with the board, with the committee, in the previous process as well, as to where I stood on the questions that were asked of me.
Let me just, so you say you can't speak for Engage Action, so let me just ask you your own view. Engage Action has said that Israel is an apartheid state. You don't believe that, do you?
Senator, I have been very clear about my positions. I have not spoken. My position on Israel is I have engaged with Israel. At the State Department, I'm engaging with Israel as a senior official.
Can I just get a yes or no? I think that this should be, pretty easy. Is Israel an apartheid state?
It's a specific term. I don't believe it's an apartheid state. And so that's, again, my work and how I work with Israeli businesses and entrepreneurs speaks for how how I'm treating that ally of ours.
Okay. Engage Action issued a statement of support after a House member equated Israel and the United States to Hamas and Taliban terrorist organizations. Do you think that Israel is a moral equivalent of a terrorist organization?
Senator, as I said earlier, I am not speaking for the organization.
No, I'm asking you. Those
are not my views.
Oh, good. I'm just looking for a yes or no. These are meant to be easy questions.
Those are not
super
my
easy.
views.
Okay, so the answer is no?
The answer is no.
Okay, good. Engage Action has issued a statement calling for a ceasefire in which they said that the current state of affairs is not a case of both sides being responsible. The state of Israel is an occupier when it comes to the Palestinians. Do you agree with that?
Senator, let me just say this, and I'm happy to clarify further, but my entire career is I have engaged with the Jewish community. As I mentioned earlier, I have engaged with Israel as a business person. That speaks for my record.
Yeah, but can we just answer my question? I mean, do you, I heard all of that, but my question is this, do you think that the state of Israel is an occupier?
Could you elaborate occupier?
No, I'm reading to you from Engage Action. Quote, this state of affairs is not a case of both sides. They have that in quotation marks. Not when Palestinians are occupied and the state of Israel is the occupier, end quote.
Senator, I'm going to speak for what I believe in, what my values are.
Yeah.
And my values are that I have worked with Israel. I've advanced a commercial interest with Israel.
But do you agree with that statement? Just yes or no? I'm just trying to give you an opportunity
That is
to
statement, Senator.
I know that. That's why I'm asking you if you agree with it or not.
So, Senator, I am not going to be able to speak for Engage's statements. Engage does not speak for all my views. And my views on Israel and my work with the Jewish community in the United States and around the world, I've made that abundantly clear. And a lot of the allyship that I have in this room also reflects on that the incredible support I have in the Jewish community.
Well, my time's expired, and I have sorely tried the patience of the chairman and the ranking member, who've been very gracious to hold this hearing open. So, I think what I'm going to do is I'll give you some questions for the record. I mean for this to be easy. I thought your position is that you didn't agree with any of those things. I just wanted to get that on the record. Maybe I've misunderstood. If I have misunderstood, then I'm really concerned. But I'll give you some questions for the record, and we can just put it in writing, and that way we'll allow you to go. I think you've been here a long time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Senator Ernst.
I'll put into the record the statement from the AJC, the American Jewish Committee, on this.
Which has always been the practice of this committee, certainly over the last 2 years when I worked in the position as chair, and that will continue. The committee will now proceed to the consideration of Colleen Shogun to be the Archivist of the United States. The question is on whether to favorably report the nomination. The clerk will call the roll.
Do we have any debate over
I'm sorry, I didn't.
Did
you wish to be recognized?
Yes, could I please, Mr.
Senator
Chairman?
Hawley, I'm sorry, I did not see you.
That's all right. No, I just put my hand up just now. before we vote on this nomination, I just want to express my deep reservations with this nominee and explain why I will be voting no, and appeal to my colleagues across the aisle to join me in trying to get relevant documents from this nominee from the Congressional Research Service. This is a nominee who was before the committee last September, I believe it was. We have a pattern from this nominee of stonewalling this committee, misleading this committee, and now she's doing the same with, frankly, very disturbing whistleblower accusations that came to us at the end of last week. I'm sorry, I think it's been almost 2 weeks ago now. Let me just refresh here the record. In September of last year, when the nominee first came before the committee, Senator Portman asked her a series of questions about her statements made on Twitter. Senator Portman's staff had found these statements themselves. She had locked her Twitter account at some point when she was in the nomination process. They found her Twitter statements, which were highly partisan, I think highly inappropriate. She refused to answer Senator Portman's statements at the time, questions at the time. So I introduced a question for the record asking her to please give to us any Twitter statements she had ever made that had been available to the public. She refused, and she then said, do we have that board, guys? She then said the following in response to my question for the record. She said, my personal Twitter account is comprised of posts about my mystery novels, of which she's written several, events at the White House Historical Association, Pittsburgh sports teams, travels, and my dog. It was made private months ago before I was nominated as archivist. Now, we know from the Twitter post that Senator Portman found this is simply not true. It is not true that her posts are composed of comments about her mystery novels and so on and so forth. We know that they are composed of highly partisan statements. When I asked her about this, I gave her a chance to correct this testimony. She said she stood by it. I then asked her, I went post by post, where she criticizes former President Trump, where she criticizes members of the United States Senate, where she expresses highly partisan views, where she suggests that religious groups should not be able to put up religious symbols on federal property, which is, by the way, not in accordance with the Supreme Court case law. And in all of these, she then refused to answer my questions. Now listen, she's entitled to have her views. She can say whatever she wants, and she can say whatever she wants on Twitter. But what she cannot do is lie to this committee. And to say to this committee that her post consisted of this, when we know from Senator Portman's research that's not true, is simply false. That's point number one. Thank you, Vijay. Point number two is after that testimony, a whistleblower, former employee of Dr. Shogan, came forward to my office. We have a normal whistleblower procedure. I'm sure you all do. We followed that procedure. I think she came to us on a Friday. We sat down with her as quickly as we could, following our usual procedure. I then called the chairman about this, and we're going to refer her allegations, I'm saying her because she's allowed her identity to be used, to the committee, which we did. The committee staff had an opportunity to meet with her. I understand they did again yesterday. And I will just tell you, and I know you all are aware of this because I've sent you all my letter that references the allegations that were made. The whistleblower said that when Dr. Shogan was at CRS, she engaged in partisan conduct and abusive behavior, allegedly, that she allegedly made unsolicited statements of support for political candidates in the workplace, that she also attempted to organize signing events for her book on federal property during work hours for commercial gain. That's the book that features the killing of a Senator Langsford, yeah. Senator Langsford seems to be doing well, though, I'm happy to say. The whistleblower further alleges that Dr. Shogan engaged in a pattern of abuse, retaliation, and persecution, including undermining the whistleblower's promotion, and that Dr. Shogan failed to discipline subordinates who made racially derogatory remarks to the whistleblower. The whistleblower is a woman of color. Now, when the staff, as I understand, asked Dr. Shogan about this, she repeatedly said she couldn't recall, she didn't have documents, and she referred staff to CRS and said you should contact CRS to ask for promotion documents, to ask for documents about her workplace event with her book. So last night, I sent a letter to CRS asking for the relevant documents. And all I would say, drawing to a close now, Mr. Chairman, what I would say is I would humbly suggest and request that we postpone a final vote on this nominee until we get these documents that Dr. Shogan referenced but said she didn't have, she couldn't get us, and repeatedly referred us to CRS. So I've asked for them from CRS. I think we should get them and look at them and do our due diligence on these whistleblower allegations. That's all I have. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anybody else wish to comment on this nominee? Seeing none, the question is now whether to favorably report the nomination. The clerk will call the roll.
Senator Hawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Congratulations to all of the nominees. Judge Ali Khan, I think last time you and I visited, it was before the Homeland Security Committee. And I asked you a number of questions there, you, including some for the record, you answered those, which I appreciated. One question that I ask you, and I ask every nominee actually on that committee and this one, is whether or not the nominee has ever litigated against a religious liberty claim. Usually the answer to that's no. In your case, you answered yes, and you listed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different cases over a period of years, actually, in which you have litigated against individuals or churches' religious liberty claims. So let's just talk about a few of those, if we could. Let's start with some of your work during COVID. Case you list here, Capitol Hill Baptist Church versus Bowser. Do you remember that case?
Yes, Senator.
You remember working on that case?
Yes, Senator.
This was a case involving the district's lockdown policies that shut down churches in the district. Is that correct?
It concerned litigation over provision of the lockdown policies. The policies restricted all types of activity in the district.
All types of activity in the district?
Yes, Senator.
Did it restrict mass protests in the district?
Well, it restricted activities that one normally expected, including work, going to stores. It also did include these provisions that were challenged concerning churches.
So it exempted unusual or unlikely activities that's in the statute, that's in the ordinance?
When the mayor was enacting these orders at the outset of the pandemic, I think she was trying to be as comprehensive as she could, and the order did restrict a number of daily activities of district residents.
But it exempted mass protests?
I don't believe it said anything one way or another.
Can you point me to the text where it exempted mass protests?
I don't believe it said anything one way or another.
Of course it didn't, because it didn't exempt mass protests, right? You know that.
I think it was silent on the issue because I don't believe it was contemplated by the mayor's office.
Ah, so you think that mass protests should be in a different category than religious observances? Is that your position?
I think if there were protests on the book, then the mayor might have thought about that when she was enacting the COVID-19 restrictions. But I think she was trying to